right, this week, NBC News brings its NBC News Learn project to our neck of the woods as they present Education Now Detroit at the Henry Ford Museum. That'll be Thursday evening, the continuation of a long look at education by the network. And once again, at the helm will be Rahima Ellis, education correspondent for NBC, who, by the way, will be joined by our Kimberly Gill at the event. And Rahima joins us this morning from New York. Rahima, it's great to have you coming back to Detroit this week.
I am excited about the fact that we get to come back to Detroit. It's a wonderful city and so many great things going on there, and education is part of it. Well,
and you, of course, are now spending, you've seen education from so many angles, from so many parts of the country, and I'm wondering if you're starting to arrive at conclusions that can be drawn across the American map. I mean, do we have so much in common with what's going on in schools in San Francisco or Baton Rouge, or are all the problems, are you finding to be very, very localized and specific?
Well, there are local issues, there's no question about that, but there are some things that we can talk about that we see across the board in terms of what's going on in our cities, particularly in areas where you have large minority populations and low-income populations. And one of the things that's happening is you have a lot of low-performing schools. You have a lot of children who are in stress. There's a lot of violence in some of their neighborhoods, and a consequence of that, that's transmitted into the school environment. And it leaves these children, sometimes it seems like they're almost war victims, and they're suffering from PTSD. In fact, it's one of the things we're going to talk about, that the trauma that students are experiencing. It's not just in Detroit. We were up in Chicago just recently. I've been down to Houston, from Boston to California, and down, as I say, into Houston. And some of these things that we're hearing about, the challenges that students are facing in school, it's not just the ABCs, it's the social, emotional, and mental aspect of what's happening in their communities that's then brought into the schools and makes learning an even bigger struggle.
It's very sobering and sad to hear. I'm wondering, though, then, does that leave us on kind of two different tracks? Are we trying to fix things in urban school districts that are maybe more related to those kinds of safety issues, and then rural school districts maybe have a different set of issues? Are we be able to kind of come at these at the same time with the same solutions, or are we missing the mark that way?
I think there have to be different solutions in different communities, because really and truly there are some unique aspects of learning and environment and in culture that goes on in different places, from an urban environment, as you talk about, to a rural one. But there are some other things I keep saying that are the same. Funding is a big issue in many places. The teachers that we have, the quality of teachers, the kind of preparation the teachers have, the kind of support staff. We're finding, whether you're in an urban environment or a rural environment, teachers are really struggling here. Yeah. We're losing teachers at an alarming rate at schools all across this country. People aren't going into education for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's pay, sometimes it's a challenging environment. Yeah. They don't have the kind of support staff that they need in order to teach.
Teacher shortage is a massive problem we're going to have to figure out. I'm wondering, obviously it would be nice to think that we could create a big best practices systems and borrow things that work in one place and move them to another. Are you finding things that work, and is there a way to translate those?
I think so, and I think that's one of the things we hope to do when we're in Detroit. We're not going to talk about all the things that are wrong. We're going to talk about some of the things that are good and that are working. Yeah. And what Detroit's going to give us an opportunity to do, Devin, is to bring these folks who are, and they're all separate silos, if you will, from administrators to policymakers to teachers to students to parents, community leaders. Sometimes they're often talking to just each other. We're going to have a chance for everybody to talk to each other. Hopefully they'll talk, and hopefully there'll be a lot of people listening, and there'll be a takeaway from them of the things that are actually working and moving students, teachers, schools, parents, etc., communities to the kind of outcome that everybody wants, and that is a better environment, better academic outcomes for kids.
One of the things that you hear a lot of politicians argue with all the time is whether or not throwing money at education ends up meaning anything. It's kind of hard to get around the fact, though, that if you don't invest enough money, you probably shouldn't be too surprised at what you get out of the system, correct?
I think that might be true. You know, Arne Duncan, who was the previous Secretary of Education from the Department of Education on the federal level, he always said budgets reflect values. And I think we could think about that from what's happening in our cities and our schools to even in our own homes and what we do personally. Where we put our money makes a big determination or determines what value we have on certain things. So money is not the only solution in so many communities, but it certainly will help, particularly in some places where they're talking about teacher strikes, for example. I've looked at a number of the teacher strikes that have occurred across the country over the last few months, and money is not the primary issue in terms of pay increases. They're looking for money for support services, librarians, nurses, social workers, mental health counselors. They don't come for free, and so there is some money that's needed in order to provide those services for kids.
Yeah, we also though watch, teachers have to struggle with like GoFundMe campaigns just to raise enough money for their own classrooms. The other thing though that I want to talk about, and I know this is, lastly, I wanted to make sure we get to this part of school safety. Yes, we have to talk about violence among students, and especially in tough neighborhoods, but we also have this thing that you and I did not have to deal with when we went to school, things like active shooter drills, and we have to worry about these mass, large-scale safety issues, and I really wonder what a lot of that is doing to sort of the general feeling of collegiality that goes on in the day-to-day in our education environments.
Well, it really is something where you have students go into schools that are scanner schools where they're tracked in terms of what they bring into school. They have to be scanned before they go in. It's like going into an airport, but it's not an airport. It's a school. And imagine what that does to your mind every day.
Yeah.
For some kids, it could give them a real sense of security because what's happening outside might be so dangerous. This is one place where they know they can come and hope that they're going to be safe because people are checking to make certain there are no weapons, there's nothing going to be brought into the school. But it is a huge issue, and I don't know when the country is going to get to a place where we don't have to put our children through these safety drills, not safety vests for fire, but safety jet for firearms and different kinds of weapons that are being brought into the
Rahima,
classroom.
we will see you on Thursday night here in Detroit. Thanks so much. We're really looking forward to it. We'll see you then. And we'll be back in just a minute.